I never would have imagined that the gift I received for my 68th birthday would nearly cost me my life and reveal the deepest betrayal a mother can face. The bottle of whiskey my daughter sent after 3 years of silence contained a deadly poison, meticulously planned to stop my heart. But fate had other plans when I decided to give that bottle to my son-in-law, unaware that it would unleash a silent hunt that would turn our small town into a battlefield. But before I continue, make sure you're subscribed to the channel and write in the comments where you're watching this video from. We love knowing how far our stories travel. The box arrived one October morning, wrapped in brown paper with just 2 words written on the card. Happy birthday. No signature, no return address, but I immediately recognized the handwriting of Rebecca, the daughter I raised for 20 years and hadn't seen in 3. I placed the box on the kitchen table, where the morning light streamed through the blinds, creating golden stripes that danced across the room. Opening the package, I found a bottle of limited edition whiskey, the kind so beautiful you'd keep it as a decoration. The amber liquid caught the light as if it held fire inside. The dark green label with gold lettering suggested a design that cost more than the contents themselves. I ran my thumb over the wax seal on the cork, feeling its texture under the ridges of my skin. There was a time when whiskey was my favorite companion at the end of the day, not carelessly, but slowly and deliberately. A single glass after a day of mending fences or cleaning gutters. When Linda was still alive, she'd pour us each a glass after dinner. On Sundays, we'd sit on the porch and let the sound of crickets fill the silence. That was before a heart attack took that option away from me. 3 years, Chayus without a single drop. And Rebecca knew it. She was there, at the hospital, when the doctor explained everything. The long list of things I could no longer have if I wanted to see 70. She didn't say much then. Just stared at her phone, thumbs moving. I convinced myself she was just trying to distract herself. Now, I'm not so sure. We didn't have a big, movie-style fight, the kind where someone slams a door on their way out. It was subtler than that. She just stopped coming to Sunday dinners. Then she didn't come for Thanksgiving. By the second Christmas without her, I realized we weren't talking at all anymore. Silence has a way of becoming a habit. Seeing her handwriting again after so long made my chest tighten. It wasn't joy, not even relief, just a weight I couldn't name. The plain white card, with just happy birthday in blue ink. No mum, no signature. Just those 2 lonely words, as if they were afraid to say more. I decided not to open the bottle. The thought didn't even cross my mind. I slid it to the other side of the table and went back to my coffee, which was now cold. The clock above the stove ticked steadily, making the house feel even emptier. I thought of Robert, my son-in-law. Robert is the kind of man who never shows up empty-handed or without tools in the back of his truck. 2 summers ago, after a storm took half the shingles off my roof, he was up on a ladder by 8 in the morning, hammer in hand, before I'd had my first sip of coffee. He's the type of person who doesn't wait for an invitation to help. If anyone deserved something good, it was him. Since I couldn't drink the whiskey, the idea of it gathering dust on my shelf felt wrong. Robert would open it, share it with friends, have a story to tell. That seemed better than watching it fade behind glass. That afternoon, the bottle was secured on the passenger seat of my old Chevrolet. I don't know why I did it, maybe out of habit, but the thought of it falling during the drive bothered me. The sun was leaning west, painting everything in that amber light we only get in late October. The fields along the road were starting to turn brown, the soybeans cut low to the ground. The air smelled faintly of smoke from a distant bonfire. Robert's house sits on a rise just outside of town, a white farmhouse with a porch that looks like it's straight out of a postcard. I pulled in, the gravel crunching under my tires, and shut off the engine. He opened the door before I could knock, wearing a red flannel shirt and faded jeans, sawdust still clinging to his boots. "Mary, what's this?" he asked, looking straight at the bottle in my hands. "From Rebecca," I replied, holding it out to him. His eyebrows rose in surprise. "Rebecca sent you this?" "Yes, I thought you'd appreciate it more than I would." He took the bottle carefully, turning it over to read the label. "This is something special, Mary. It's the kind of bottle you save for a special occasion," I told him. "So make tonight a special occasion." He smiled. "I think I'll do that. Thank you." It felt good to give it to him, to see it was going somewhere it would be appreciated. I got back in my truck, the evening light glinting off the dashboard. On the way home, I kept thinking about the bottle, not with longing, but with curiosity. Rebecca never spent that kind of money without a reason. Most of her younger life, she was borrowing gas money from me and forgetting to pay it back. So why now? Why a gift she knew I couldn't use? The thought kept nagging at the back of my mind as I pulled into the garage. I pushed it away. Not everything needs a reason, I told myself, but I didn't believe it. That night I made a pot roast, and the house filled with the aroma of onions and carrots, the kind of meal that's better shared, though I ate it alone. The wall clock was nearing 9 o'clock. I was washing the last dish when the phone rang. The landline. Almost nobody calls that number anymore. "Hello? Mum?" Rebecca's voice was smooth and casual, as if no time had passed. I leaned against the counter, surprised. "Rebecca?" "Happy birthday," she said, with a delay that was too long to sound natural. "Did you get my gift?" "I did." "Well, what did you think?" "It's a beautiful bottle." "Did you try it yet?" Her tone shifted, just a little, sharper around the edges. "No, I gave it to Robert. I figured he'd get better use out of it." Silence. No crackle, no static, just a long, heavy pause. "You gave it to Robert?" Her voice went cold. "That's right." There was a sound like a sigh, slow and measured. "Oh." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone for a moment before hanging it up. The clock kept ticking. My stomach churned, not from the pot roast, but from something less tangible. The way she'd asked about the whiskey, as if she cared in a way she shouldn't. I turned off the kitchen light and went to bed, but sleep was a long time coming. When it did, it was light and restless. The next morning, I tried to shake off the strange feeling. I poured a fresh cup of coffee and sat down with the newspaper, but the phone rang again midday. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was local. "Mrs. Davis?" a woman's voice asked when I answered. "Yes?" "This is Laura Miller, Robert's wife. I think you should know, Robert is in the hospital. He collapsed this morning. The doctors think it might be some kind of poisoning." The coffee in my hand went instantly cold. Poisoning? He was fine last night. We had a drink with dinner, and this morning he could barely stand. The doctors are running tests. I said nothing. My eyes went to the counter, to the empty spot where the whiskey had been less than 24 hours before. "Did he eat anything unusual?" she asked. My mouth was dry. "No, but I gave him a bottle yesterday. The whiskey from Rebecca." There was a pause. In the background, I could hear hospital noises, beeping monitors, and a cart squeaking down the hall. "I'll tell the doctors," she said finally. "If you think of anything else, anything at all, please call me." I promised I would, and hung up. I stood in the kitchen, the house silent around me. The October light had turned pale and flat. I didn't move for a long time. When I finally did, it was to go to the trash can. Something white caught my eye near the bottom, a small plastic vial, like for vitamins. No label, just a faint powder clinging to the inside. I didn't remember throwing it out. I picked it up, the cap screwed on tight. I went to the refrigerator. On the middle shelf was a glass container with about half a cup of whiskey, what was left after I'd poured Robert a small taste before giving him the bottle. I hadn't even remembered saving it until that moment. My hands trembled as I took it out and set it on the counter next to the vial. I thought of Richard, an old friend who served with me 30 years ago and now ran a small veterinary lab on the outskirts of town. He owed me a favor after I'd pulled his truck out of a ditch a couple of winters back. I called him. "Richard, I need you to test something for me," I said calmly. "What is it?" "Whiskey, and maybe something else." He didn't ask any more questions, just told me to meet him after the lab closed. That evening I drove out there, the glass container wrapped in a paper bag on the seat beside me. Richard met me in the parking lot, wearing a lab coat over a hoodie, the faint smell of disinfectant in the air. "I'm going to regret this, aren't I?" he asked. "Just tell me what's in it," I replied. He nodded, took the bag, and disappeared inside. I sat in the truck with the engine running, watching the light drain from the sky. The radio was off. My thoughts went back over the last 24 hours, retracing every step. The handwriting, the bottle, Rebecca's voice when I told her I'd given it to Robert. That long, heavy chos. Richard called the next day, just after noon. "Mary, you're not going to like this. There's something in the whiskey, white snake root. In the right dose, it'll stop a man's heart." I closed my eyes. The phone felt heavy in my hand. "You said Robert drank this." "Yes." "And you didn't." "No." He let out a slow breath. "Then you may have just dodged a bullet." And that's where the first part of this story ends. Not with answers, but with a question that would lead me to places I never thought I'd have to go. Because the moment I hung up, I knew Rebecca had sent me more than a gift. She had sent me a message. I used to think there was no worse sound than the phone ringing in the middle of the night. Turns out there is. It's the phone ringing when you already know, deep down, that the news will be terrible. When Richard hung up, the world around me fell silent, as if the house itself were holding its breath. I didn't waste any time. I grabbed my coat from the back of the chair, the truck keys from the hook by the door, and headed for St. Luke's Hospital. The drive to town was all empty traffic lights and intersections, one of those autumn mornings where the sun feels bright but holds no warmth. I parked in the far corner of the lot and walked quickly, one hand in my pocket, the other pressed against my ribs, as if I could hold in whatever was stirring inside me. All hospitals have the same smell, something sterile mixed with burnt coffee, and the light is always too white. A volunteer pointed me toward Robert's room. He didn't look like the strong man who had climbed onto my roof uninvited. He was faded, his skin a shade paler than the pillow under his head. The monitors beside the bed hummed and blinked in time with a stubborn, slow heartbeat. Laura was sitting in a plastic chair, pulled as close to the bed as possible. She had that look I've seen 100 times, of someone waiting for something that refuses to be rushed. "Mary," she said, standing up, "thank you for coming." "How is he?" "They're trying to stabilize his heart rate." Their hands were clasped in front of her, not in prayer, but as if she were trying to keep the air from escaping. They said they found signs of a plant-based toxin. They're running more tests. Robert's mouth was slightly open, air moving in and out in a fragile rhythm. His hair, always neatly combed, had fallen across his forehead in a way that made him look younger and more vulnerable. "Did he eat anything unusual last night?" I asked. "Or drink something he doesn't normally drink?" "We both had a drink with dinner." She looked at me directly. The question was already there. "The bottle you brought." "I need you to tell the doctors exactly that," I said, my voice urgent. "Tell them it was new, unopened, and that I can get them a sample of the same liquid." She reached out as if to take my hand, then changed her mind and gripped the bed rail instead. "Mary, what is this? Do you think—" "I don't know what to think," I answered, which was only a half-truth. "But I'm going to find out." The doctor came in, a man in his 50s with a face trained to show no emotion. He explained in calm tones about heart rhythms, enzymes, and continued observation. He didn't say what he didn't know, and he didn't know much yet. When he left, I promised Laura I'd call as soon as I had anything that could help. In the truck, I didn't start the engine right away. I sat with the key half-turned, watching my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked like a woman who had nothing left to break that hadn't been cracked before. "White snake root," I said aloud, testing the words in the air like a carpenter checking a board for warp. They sounded cruel. They sounded deliberate. At home, the silence greeted me like a neighbor with nothing to say. I went straight to the refrigerator. The glass container with the rest of the whiskey was still there, tucked behind the milk. I held it up to the light, watching the liquid curve against the glass as I tilted it. You wouldn't know just by looking at it. You never do. The worst things always come disguised as something harmless. I set the container by the sink and went to the trash can. I'd thrown that little white vial in there yesterday. I lifted the lid and realized the bag had been moved, put back differently, and the vial was gone. I looked at the door. The lock was set just as I'd left it that morning. The windows were down and latched. I didn't keep a spare key anywhere obvious. Still, someone had been here. You could feel it, the way you know when a room has been rearranged, even if you can't pinpoint what's changed. I took a deep breath through my nose and let it out slowly. No panic. Panic is loud and stupid. I needed something quiet and useful. I called Richard again. "It's gone," I said when he answered. "What is?" "The small vial I told you about. Someone took it out of my trash. It wasn't me. I know what my own hands have done in my own house." He didn't tell me I might be mistaken. Richard understands the cost of ignoring what your gut already knows. "You need to call the police," he said. "I can document what's in the whiskey, but that vial would have been clear proof of tampering." "I know," I replied. "I will." "And Mary?" "Yes." "Don't let whoever did this think you're not ready." "I'm not," I said, and ended the call. I made coffee I didn't drink and sat at the table with a notepad. The act of writing calms me. I drew a line down the middle of the page and labelled the left side "What I Know" and the right side "What I Can Prove." Under "What I Know," I wrote, "Rebecca sent the bottle. Rebecca asked if I had tried it. Rebecca's tone changed when I told her I gave it to Robert. The whiskey Richard tested has white snake root. The vial is gone." Under "What I Can Prove," I wrote, "Richard's test, the remaining sample in the container Rebecca's call last night." Then I looked at the two columns and wanted to build a bridge between them. Bridges don't just appear because you want them to. You have to build them. I took the small digital voice recorder out of the desk drawer. It's old, a little scuffed at the corners, but it works. I checked the battery, half full. I slipped it into the inside pocket of my coat, right where its weight felt like a hand on my chest, reminding me to breathe. It was just past noon when I pulled up to Rebecca's apartment complex. Her place was in a row of others that were nearly identical: neutral siding, brass numbers, and an automatic porch light. Her car was in the driveway, clean, a decade newer than mine. I walked up the path and knocked. She opened the door with a face that shifted quickly. Surprise, then calculation, then an expression that was trying to look welcoming. "Mum," she said, as if she were expecting me, but also as if she had no idea what I could possibly want. "This is unexpected." "Is it?" I asked, and walked past her without waiting for an invitation. The place smelled like lemon and nothing else. She keeps it spotless. Everything was always at right angles, nothing out of place. "I heard about Robert," she said, closing the door. "It's scary. Laura is with him now. The doctors think it might be a virus." "Is that what they think?" I kept my tone neutral. If I pushed, she'd shut down. If I showed softness, she'd use it against me. I went into the kitchen. On the counter were 3 bottles, 2 whiskey, 1 rye, lined up like soldiers. None of them were the brand I'd received. None were open. "Did you try the bottle you sent me?" I asked. She gave a small laugh. "The idea was for you to enjoy yourself, you know, for your birthday. You know I don't drink anymore." "People change," she said with a casual shrug. I took another step toward the counter and ran my finger along the rim of an empty glass by the sink, buying time. "Robert enjoyed it," I said. "He said his favorite pour was the one on the middle shelf, the single malt." She blinked once, slower than a natural reflex. "Did he?" "Funny thing, where?" I said, feeling the recorder in my pocket beat like a second heart. "I never told you where I'd put it." For a fraction of a second she was still, like an animal that hears a twig snap in the woods. Then her mouth curved into a practiced smile, and she shook her head with a rehearsed laugh. "You must have mentioned it. You get talkative when you're feeling sentimental." "I didn't," I said, holding her gaze until she had to choose between looking away or facing me. She chose a third option. She picked up a dish towel and began drying a glass that was already dry. "Mum," she said, looking at the glass instead of me. "You always overthink things, always finding something to fix, even when nobody asked you to." "You sent me a $500 bottle of whiskey I can't drink," I replied. "I'm trying to understand that." She set the glass down on the counter and opened her hands like someone with nothing to hide. "Then maybe there's nothing to understand. Maybe give me the benefit of the doubt, for once." Her voice could sound reasonable if you hadn't known her for over 30 years. My daughter has a way of sounding sincere when she's lying. That pause from the late-night call hung between us like a third person in the room. "I'm going to ask you a question," I said, "and I'm going to let the silence after it give me the answer." She looked at me like we were playing chess, and I'd just announced my next move. "Okay. Did you tamper with that whiskey?" Silence. Silence is a living thing when you use it right. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the microwave changed from 12:09 to 12:10. A car drove past, slowly outside, its tires audible on the asphalt. She didn't look away. She didn't speak either. "Goodbye, Rebecca," I said, "because sometimes leaving is the only sentence that matters." She said my name as I turned. "Mum," in that tone where the word is both a hook and a warning. I stopped but didn't turn back. "You're going to keep accusing me of things. You're going to push me away," she said. I'm not accusing, I replied, looking at the door. I'm collecting. Outside, the air was sharp and metallic. I sat in the truck and turned off the recorder. The red light blinked and went out. I set it on the seat beside me like a silent witness. My hands were steady, but my mind was churning. I didn't drive home. Not yet. I parked in the far corner of a grocery store lot where no one would bother me and made a call I'd been avoiding since Richard mentioned White Snake Route. Detective Evans, a deep voice answered after 2 rings. Detective, my name is Mary Davis. I believe I have information about a poisoning. I have a sample of the substance and a recording that might interest you. He didn't ask for explanations over the phone. Men who know their job don't demand the whole truth in the first breath. Can you come in this afternoon? He asked. Yes, I can. He gave me a time and an office number down the back hall of the station. When I hung up, I sat with my hands on the steering wheel, staring straight ahead. The automatic doors of the grocery store kept opening and closing, people going in and out, carrying paper bags of food that would make their homes smell like dinner. Back at the house, I stopped at the mailbox because sometimes you need to do something ordinary to keep the other things from consuming you whole. Flyers, a bill, a grocery ad, and a postcard from a car dealership that thinks they can win me over with 0% interest. Inside, I put the glass container in a plastic bag, sealed it like I knew what I was doing, and put it in an old cigar tin where I used to keep nails. The recorder went into the same tin. I put the tin in a paper bag with handles and, for good measure, put that bag inside another one. After you find something missing from your own trash, extra layers feel more like prudence than paranoia. I called Laura. She answered quickly, her voice small and tired. Laura, I'm going to the police, I told her. I have a sample and some other evidence. Robert's resting, she said. They put him on a heart monitor. He keeps waking up and asking what day it is. I answer her, and she feels like she's trying to decide if she believes me. I'll call you after I talk to the detective, I promised. Tell him I'll stop by later, if he wants to see a familiar face. She laughed, a single breathless sound. He likes it when people tell him to be strong, she said. But he likes your company better. I checked everything, locked every door, double-checking the windows before I left. The paper bag sat on the passenger seat like a person. I buckled it in, a comfort habit when common sense feels far away. On the way to the station, I turned on the radio without really listening. People were singing about things that seemed simple, which first irritated me, then made me tired, and finally made me feel nothing at all. The police station was colder than the hospital somehow, but it smelled better. Evans met me in a small office with a window that looked out onto a brick wall. He was younger than me, but older than a rookie, with sharp eyes and a tie that had been adjusted several times during the day. He offered me water. I took it, because my mouth was dry, and because people notice when you refuse everything they offer. He waited until I took a sip before he asked his first question. Tell me about the whiskey. And so I did. I gave him the dates, Rebecca's exact words, and the meaning of that pause that didn't sound like surprise. I didn't share my theories, just the facts, letting him arrange them as he saw fit. Then I put the paper bag on the table, took out the tin, opened it, and placed the glass container and the recorder on his desk, like tools at the start of a job. He didn't touch the items yet. He asked questions that seemed small but weren't. Who else has keys to your house? When did you last check your trash? Did you mention the vial to anyone besides Richard? Then he picked up the recorder and weighed it in his hand, as if assessing the weight a word can carry when you need it to hold up. You understand, Ma'am, he said. This doesn't become a case because you and I have a feeling. This becomes a case when what you've handed me can survive official scrutiny. I understand, I replied. I want other people to look at it. He nodded. We'll send the liquid to the state lab. We'll make a copy of your audio. If there's cause, we'll act. If there isn't, we'll tell you exactly why we can't. You agree with that? I do, I said, and I meant it. I don't want the wrong person punished. I want the right truth revealed. As I got up to leave, he said my name like he was testing it. Mrs. Davis. Yes? Don't talk to your daughter again until I clear it. If she contacts you, you write down the time and what she says, and you keep your answers shorter than her questions. I nodded, surprised by the feeling of someone else finally being willing to carry a corner of the weight. Outside, the afternoon had turned grey and dull, the kind of light that hurts your eyes more than it illuminates the path. I drove to the hospital. Laura was in the same chair, and the same monitors were still singing their quiet electronic song. Robert looked more like himself. Some colour had returned to his skin, and his mouth was less tight around the breath coming in and out. I put my hand on the bed rail, and his eyes fluttered open. You look like hell, he whispered. You should see yourself, I answered, and he smiled with just the left side of his mouth, the way men do when smiling asks too much of the rest of their face. Heard you're making friends with the police, he said. I'm trying to make sure they're on our side when they show up, I replied. He closed his eyes again, nodded once, and drifted off. I stood there longer than I needed to, listening to the machine that kept him honest about his heartbeat. Laura was whispering words that belonged only to the two of them. At home, everything was exactly as I'd left it. The silence filled the rooms like a guest who refuses to leave. I made an omelette I didn't finish and washed the pan. Because some things you do, just to prove to yourself, you're still the person who does them. I went to the hall closet, took the fireproof box from the top shelf, and opened it on the kitchen table. It held the documents of a lifetime: birth certificates, the deed to the house, and Linda's rose gold wedding ring that I still wasn't ready to part with. I added a sticky note to the inside lid. Whiskey sample with police. Do not discard. I don't know who the note was for. Maybe myself. I slept on the couch with the hall light on. I hadn't done that since the night after my heart attack, and my chest didn't enjoy the similarity. I woke up before dawn because the body remembers old alarms. I made coffee and didn't drink it. I listened to the house breathe. When the sun finally came up, I called Laura and told her I'd be by around noon. She said the doctor thought Robert would be moved out of the ICU if his vitals stayed steady. At 10 in the morning, the phone rang. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail because I'd learned something important the day before. You don't owe anyone an answer before you're ready to give it. The message came through after the second ring. I waited, then hit play. Mum, it's me. Rebecca's voice was tight like a wire. We need to talk, sooner rather than later. She paused. Call me back. I didn't call back. I wrote down the time and the exact words, putting the paper in the fireproof box, because sometimes you need to create your own evidence. I looked out the window at my backyard, which refuses to turn green no matter how much a woman waters it. The porch chair creaked once. No wind I could see. The day fell silent again. If you want me to admit I was scared, I won't deny it. Fear isn't something I hide anymore. It belongs to the truth the same way nails belong to wood. It holds everything together. I stood there in the kitchen with my hand on the back of a chair, and I knew the next part without needing to write it down. Whatever this was, It was past the point where a mother and daughter could fix it with a quiet talk at the table. It was past the point where a bottle was just a gift and a hospital was just a place that happens to other people. It was going to get worse before it got better, and I was just going to keep walking toward it. One room, one phone call, one steady breath at a time. There's a kind of silence that doesn't sit still. It wanders. It taps the rim of your coffee cup. It watches the phone on the counter and counts to 60 with you. Then it starts over. Detective Evans told me not to talk to my daughter, so I didn't call Rebecca back. I wrote down the time of the voicemail as if it were a license plate I needed to memorize. In the morning, I followed the detective's instructions exactly, but the house felt watched. I left the phone by the hall door and walked through the rooms with my hands behind my back, not because I expected to find anything, but because women like me don't sit when they can stand, don't rest when there's work to be done. The October light came in weaker today, like a white sheet hung over the sun. I checked the back door, the window locks, the side entry from the garage with the stubborn lock you have to lift as you turn. Everything in its place, everything normal. Normal isn't the same as safe. I made a second cup of coffee I didn't drink and opened the fireproof box on the kitchen table. Inside, the deed, the insurance forms, Linda's ring, the index card where I copied the exact words of Rebecca's message. I added another card. Detective Evans, 2:30 p.m., underlined twice. All morning I kept myself from calling the station, not out of hesitation, but because I wanted to show up with a day's worth of resolve built up inside me. Before I left, I did another slow walk through the house. In the front hall, I stopped. The deadbolt on the door lined up with the strike plate, just a fraction of a millimeter off. A fresh scratch on the edge of the metal, round and clean, like a poorly cut key would make after a couple of tries. Nothing broken, nothing forced, just a mark you only notice if you know the door, like you know the bones in your hand. A thought lodged in my chest and didn't move. Someone had been inside. I went to the utility drawer and found a small piece of thread and some clear tape. I laid the thread across the bottom of the door frame and taped it down, a trick I learned from a serviceman tired of finding his locker tossed. You don't catch an intruder, you create a story about whether he was there. When I got in the truck, the house looked empty and harmless, exactly as a house should. Still, I backed out of the driveway as if I were leaving a sleeping animal behind. The police station was 3 turns and one long straightaway from the hospital. I carried the weight of Robert's illness in my bones as I walked down the hall to Evans's office. He occupied a modest room, small window, large desk, stacks of files that seemed to grow in the dim light. He stood to shake my hand and gestured to a chair. He didn't look like a man who'd gotten too little sleep or too much. He looked like a man who knew what to do with hard facts. "Thanks for coming in, Mrs. Davis," he said, "and for the samples yesterday. We've sent them to the state lab. The preliminary results from your friend Richard match what we saw. We're taking it seriously." "I figure seriousness has levels," I said. He almost smiled. "It does. For now, it means we're looking for corroboration. The hospital reports, your audio, the chain of custody on the sample." He slid a notepad toward me. "I want your timeline in your own words. When did you get the package? When did you give it to Mr. Miller? When did your daughter call? When did you find the vial was missing?" I recounted it all, straight, watching his pen move. He didn't interrupt, except to confirm a time or a date. When I finished, he tapped the pad with the side of his pen and leaned back. "You said the trash bag had been moved. Any sign of forced entry?" "No." Anyone else with keys? No spare hidden. Nobody I gave one to recently. My late wife had hers. My daughter had one when she was younger. When was the last time you saw her with that key? The answer wanted to be a lifetime ago, but the truth came dressed in a hospital gown. 5 years ago, after the heart attack, when Rebecca came to get a few things for me before I was discharged. She brought slippers, sweatpants, and my phone charger. At the time, I thanked her for the kindness of remembering the charger. I didn't ask for the key back. I guess I just assumed she left it on the kitchen counter. After my heart attack, I said slowly. She had it then. I don't remember her giving it back. Evans nodded, neither surprised nor satisfied. If someone got in without force, that helps explain the missing vial. Anyone else know about it? Just Richard. I'll ask him to document the conversation you two had, just to show we're not creating evidence after the fact. He closed the notepad. Mrs. Davis, I'll tell you plainly. Do not meet with your daughter. If she invites you anywhere, you let me know. If she shows up, you call 911. I mean it. I thought of Rebecca's voice on my voicemail, taut like a wire under the hood of a car you shouldn't touch while the engine is hot. I'll do exactly what you say. He slid a card across the desk. My cell. If you feel something is off, you call. I'd rather be wrong twice than right too late. I appreciate that, I said, getting up. As I left, the building smelled of copier toner and floor wax. I walked down 2 flights of stairs and stopped on the landing to breathe. I wasn't out of breath. I was checking if the floor under me was still the same one I'd stepped on when I came in. Laura called when I was parking at the hospital. I answered right away. Mary, he's better, she said, her voice thick with tears. They're moving him from the ICU to a step-down unit. He keeps apologizing every time he wakes up, like he thinks he ruined someone's party. It'll be a party when he's home, I said. Can I come up? Please. Robert looked washed out, but solid. Sitting up now, his eyes clearer. He held out his forearm when I came in. That old working man's handshake where you grip each other by the wrist. You look worse today, he said, which made Laura laugh through the tissue she was holding to her chin. I brought my worst look for a visit, I said, pulling up a chair. I'll bring my best one tomorrow. Laura excused herself to talk to a nurse. When the curtain was pulled shut, Robert lowered his voice. Mary, between us. He glanced at the door, then back. Do you think Rebecca did this? I think that bottle wasn't a gift. He watched my face, like he was learning a language from it. Are you going to be okay dealing with this? I'm going to follow the law, I said. I'm going to be steady. That wasn't my question. I let the question hang long enough to show I'd heard it. I'm going to be okay dealing with this. He squeezed my forearm once, then let go. Women like us don't hug unless we're burying someone. The squeeze is permission to feel without ceremony. The curtain opened, and Laura came back with a younger woman at her side, maybe 30, hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, eyes tired but sharp. I recognized her from the photos on the mantel at Rebecca's house. Laura, my daughter-in-law, who I'd only spoken to twice since the wedding, politely like distant neighbors. Mary, she said, I'm glad you're here. I stood up. How are you holding up? She looked at Robert, scared, angry, mostly scared. Her voice dropped. We need to talk. Laura patted Robert's hand and said, I'll give you 2 a minute. And she slipped out into the hall. A woman who understands when a conversation needs privacy, even if she's not the one who asked for it. Laura led me to the small family lounge around the corner. There was a coffee machine that made everything taste like plastic, and two chairs with backs too straight to be comfortable. She didn't sit. Neither did I. "I don't know what you know," she began, "but I know Rebecca has been different for a long time. Distant, secretive. She keeps vials in a cabinet in the garage, dried plants. She says it's for a hobby. She got into online groups about herbal extraction." She swallowed. I didn't I didn't think it would connect to something like this. "White snake root," I said. "Have you heard that name?" Her eyes showed recognition or fear, or both. "Yes, I saw it in her search history. I thought she was just reading, studying. Detective Evans will want to talk to you if you're willing." She nodded quickly. "I already called him. Left a message." "Good," I said. Relief and grief are cousins. I felt one visiting on behalf of the other. "Laura, if you have anything, screenshots, messages, pictures of those vials, save them. Let the detective follow that line." She looked at me hard enough to really see me. "Why would she do this to you?" I could have said a lot of things. Money I didn't give her. Love I didn't show her the way she wanted. Disappointments that curdled into resentments. Instead, I said the truth as I knew it. Because if she can't control the narrative, she'd rather burn the page. She shivered as if the words were a cold draft. "She asked me this morning if I'd heard from you. Said she wanted to know if you liked the bottle." "What did you say?" "That you'd given it to my dad." We stood in silence for a few seconds with that sentence between us, the kind of thing that changes shape the longer you look at it. "Thank you," I said, "for telling me." "I'm sorry," she answered, and I knew she meant all of it, not just the part she said out loud. We went back to Robert's room and talked about lighter things: the weather, football, the cafeteria soup they were trying to pass off as chicken noodle. I left when the nurse came to check the monitors, promising to bring magazines, pretending that mattered to the outcome. On the way home, I stopped at the hardware store. I bought 2 new deadbolts and a pack of those little stick-on alarms that shriek when a door is opened. The clerk remarked that winter was coming early. I said something about needing to get ready for it. He bagged the locks and wished me a good day. We say those things to each other. Have a good day, as if the day will listen. At home, the thread I'd taped to the door was exactly where I'd left it. Undisturbed. I stepped over it and closed the door behind me with a soft click. I'd thought about calling a locksmith, but installing the locks myself felt like making my own bed in a strange hotel room. If I did it, maybe I could lay my head down without all the noise in it. I installed the first lock on the back door, then the second on the front, screwing the plates in slow and steady, the muscles in my forearms familiar with the work. The little alarms went on the frames with a sound like a bandage being pulled off. I armed them and opened the door to hear the shrill alarm, confirming they'd work. And they did. Good. When I was done, the sun had dropped low enough to make long shadows across the floor. I heated a can of soup and ate it standing up, holding the bowl in my left hand and the spoon in my right. Old habits. Fewer dishes to wash that way. The phone buzzed on the hall table. I didn't jump. I walked to it at the speed of a woman who is going to answer a door without rushing. Unknown number again. I let it vibrate. It stopped. Seconds later, a text message appeared. "Rebecca, we need to talk face to face today." A second message followed before I could process the first. "Rebecca, don't make this worse than it already is." I set the phone on the table like it might burn me. I wrote down the time and the messages exactly as they came on a piece of paper and added it to the fireproof box. Then I took Detective Evans's card from my wallet and dialed. He answered quickly. "Evans, it's Davis," I said. "She's asking to meet." "Don't respond." The words as decisive as a gate closing. "Forward me the texts. I'll log them. If she calls, let it go to voicemail." "She left a message earlier. I transcribed it." "Good. Keep doing that." I hesitated. "Detective, could you come by and look at my front door? I think someone used a key that wasn't mine." "I can send an officer to photograph and document it. I'll come by myself if I'm free in the next hour." He arrived 40 minutes later with a young officer named Peterson. They photographed the strike plate, the tiny scratch where the key had scraped, the thread taped to the bottom like a makeshift trap. Evans didn't show surprise. He didn't seem like a man who enjoyed being right, but he didn't waste energy faking surprise when he wasn't. "Do you have the original set of keys?" he asked. I went to the hall closet and pulled out the small tin where we kept the extras 20 years ago. Inside, 2 brass keys marked front and back in Linda's neat handwriting. 1 spare key and 1 key that shouldn't be there. An unmarked copy, cut just a little off-center, causing it to rattle in the tin. My stomach went cold. "This isn't ours," I said. "We never left one unlabeled. We labeled everything." Evans had Peterson bag it for evidence. "We'll see if we can get prints. No promises. Keys aren't great for prints." "Do what you can," I said. "I'd like for every little item in this story to stop pretending it's not connected to the rest." When they left, the house felt different. Not safer, not less watched, just witnessed. There's something that happens when the official world enters your private space. The floor tilts and then straightens out at a new angle. I sat at the kitchen table and held my coffee cup with both hands, though it was empty. The porch chair creaked, no visible wind. I waited for footsteps that didn't come. I put the phone on Do Not Disturb and turned it face down. When I was a girl, I thought being a grown-up meant nobody could tell you what to do. Now it means I've learned who to listen to. Around 9 o'clock, a car idled outside long enough for me to get up and go to the window. The headlights swept the porch and then went out. I stood at the window until I heard the engine drive away. It could be nothing. A lost teenager, a delivery driver checking an address. It felt like something that wanted to see if I would flinch. I didn't sleep. I lay on the couch with the hall light on and my boots by the door. I'm too old for heroics. I'm not too old to be ready. Just before dawn, the phone vibrated again. Voicemail, no ring. I'd forgotten about Do Not Disturb. I played the message on low volume. "Mum, you're making this complicated," Rebecca's voice said, quieter than before, as if she were somewhere she didn't want to be overheard. "You went to the police. That's not smart. We could have worked this out. You're not thinking straight." She hung up. I wrote it all down. "We could have worked this out." Telling words. Work what out? At 8 o'clock sharp, Evans called. "The state lab came back with preliminary results," he said. "Independent confirmation of white snake root in your sample. It's enough to formally open a case and subpoena the hospital's medical records for Mr. Miller. We're moving." I let out a breath that had been living in me since Richard first said snake root. "Tell me what you need." "Keep doing what you're doing. Document. Don't engage. Lock your doors. I'll be in touch for a formal recorded statement. If your daughter communicates, save everything. If she shows up, call 911. I mean it." "I know you do," I said. "Detective?" "Yes?" "Thank you." He didn't say, "You're welcome." He said, "We'll do our job." Coming from a man like him, it was the same thing. I showered, got dressed, and put on a clean shirt. There's a way a woman needs to look when the day is going to demand she be steady. I made breakfast and ate it at the table, like every bite was a sound choice. I drove to the hospital with a stack of magazines under my arm, about houses, home improvement, a glossy one about gardens that would never grow in our region's dry soil. Robert was alert enough to feign interest in an article about chainsaw safety. We both knew he was humoring me. The pretense was a kindness. Laura came in during an article on deck maintenance. She had her phone in her hand and looked like someone who hadn't slept in a bed, just near one. "Detective Evans called me," she said. "He wants me to bring him Rebecca's old laptop. I still have it from before we were married." "Bring it to him," I advised. "Let the law carry what it was built to carry." She nodded. "Mary, she texted me." She continued with her eyes down. "She asked if you were playing the hero. Said if anything happens, it's on you." She looked up. I forwarded it to Evans. "Good," I said. A heat rose in my chest, not the old kind. It was the kind that distinguishes between a threat and a warning. Don't answer anything she sends. Not a word. Not even to say you won't answer. When I left, the light outside had the raw honesty of midday. I drove home the long way, not out of fear, but because I wanted to put more distance between me and what was coming next. The thread on the door was still intact. I stepped over it like it was a border I could respect and locked the door behind me. I sat down with a pen and a yellow legal pad and wrote, "What does she want?" in big letters that crossed the page. Underneath, I made 2 columns again. Money. Control. Under money, I wrote, "Last winter, 20,000, refused." Under control, I wrote, "Bottle location, vial gone, calls, we need to talk." The control side weighed heavier on the scale. Money is a reason. Control is a habit. Habits last longer. Around noon, the door alarm let out its sharp cry. I was already out of my chair, phone in hand, before my brain could tell my body it had overreacted. The alarm chirped again, doing its job. I moved to the window out of sight and pulled the curtain back a finger's width. A delivery truck. The driver had opened the screen door to leave a padded envelope on the doormat. He glanced at the alarm, shrugged like a man who's encountered worse noises, and walked back. The door closed softly. The alarm went silent. I let my heart settle back into place and waited. When the truck drove away, I opened the door. The envelope had no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper, no note, just a printed photograph. My porch from the night before, taken from across the street. The porch chair still, the light over the door glowing. No one in the frame. The photo had been taken in the last 12 hours. I looked out at the street, at the neighbours' fences, at the spot near the corner where a car could sit with its lights off and watch, unseen. Then I took the photograph to the fireproof box, added it to the pile, and called Evans. He answered right away. I described what had arrived, how it came, what it showed. "Don't discard it," he instructed. "I'll send someone." "You're going to get tired of hearing from me," I said. "I prefer it to the alternative," he replied. He hung up quickly, turning our conversation into a task to be completed. I stood at the window, watching the street sideways, the way you watch a wild animal you don't want to startle. The porch chair moved once. No wind. Houses are like that. What looks static is always communicating something if you're willing to see it. By late afternoon, the police had taken the photograph and logged my statement about its arrival. They took the envelope too. Evans texted me. "We're requesting security camera footage from your block." The evening came like a door slowly closing. I heated last night's soup and ate it sitting on the back steps, the October air cutting clean in my lungs. The backyard darkened. The chair sat still. And somewhere distant, a dog barked at something only dogs can sense. I went inside and turned on the hall light. The phone buzzed one more time. Rebecca, you think they're going to protect you from what you started? Call me. I didn't call. I copied it word for word and slid the paper into the box. The box latched with that soft, final sound it always makes. I put it back on the highest shelf, the way a woman stores a weight where she can't trip over it in the dark. I stood still, listening to the house talk to itself. The click and sigh of wood, the thin whine of the refrigerator motor, the tick of a clock that doesn't understand time. I thought of the first time Rebecca said "Mum" in a way that made my heart want to stand up and salute, and the last time she said "Mom" in a way that made it want to shrink. It was fully dark by the time I finally lay down on the couch. I put my hand on my chest and felt my heart at work, slow, steady, efficient. A long time ago, a doctor told me I would know if I was in trouble. That night, that felt like the most honest thing I owned. I don't know if sleep came or if the night just decided to have mercy, but when the phone rang at 6:12 in the morning, I was ready. I answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Davis?" Evans said. No greeting. "Yes." The state lab confirmed. "We're requesting a warrant." I closed my eyes and pictured the porch chair, the white thread across the threshold, the photograph of my own house taken from across the street. I saw a bottle catching the morning light like shame in a glass. "Where do you need me?" I asked. "Exactly where you are," he said. "And whatever happens, you don't open the door unless the person on the other side can prove they're here to help." The line went quiet. The house listened. And I remained in the small country I had built within my walls, waiting for the day to cross the threshold. They say the knock you don't expect is the one you remember. But this time, I expected it. I'd been expecting it from the moment Evans told me the lab had confirmed the poison. Still, when the knock came, loud and decisive, my chest seized up. Not from fear, but from the knowledge that the line we'd been following in the dark was about to be painted in bright, official ink. That knock meant the warrant had teeth now, and the day wasn't going to wait for me to feel ready. It was a little after 8 in the morning. The light outside had that pale gold quality that barely touches the ground before it fades. I opened the door to find Evans with 2 uniformed officers. Peterson, from before, and another I didn't know, young enough that his duty belt looked too big for him. They were dressed for a job that wasn't going to stay on paper. "Morning, Mrs. Davis," Evans said, holding up a folded document in a clear plastic glove. "Judge signed it at 7:43. We have authorization to search your daughter's residence and seize any items relevant to the case." He didn't need to explain. This was the moment everything could change. "Do you need me there?" I asked. "No," he said. "And that's not a request. It's an instruction. We don't want you in her line of sight today. We'll conduct the search. If we find what we expect, we'll proceed accordingly." Proceed accordingly is police language for your life might not look the same by dinner. Peterson glanced into the hall behind me. "Any changes overnight?" "The thread is still intact. No alarms went off." Evans nodded curtly. "Good. Keep them armed. I'll see about getting a proper camera system installed before the week is out." They left in a convoy. A black sedan, a squad car, rolling down the street like a line of punctuation, headed for an unfinished sentence. I stood in the doorway until they turned the corner. Then I closed the door and looked at the thread on the bottom of the frame, still perfectly motionless, as if daring someone to disturb it. The next few hours stretched out. I tried to read. The words sat on the page like strangers at a bus stop. I made coffee. I didn't drink it. Around 11 o'clock, I took a slow walk to the edge of town, stopping at the small Veterans Memorial Park, where the benches face a fountain that hasn't worked since last summer. The sound of traffic on the main drag was distant enough to let the air settle. I'd been here once with Rebecca, when she was 10. We'd brought bread for the ducks. She'd asked me what all the names on the plaques were for. I told her they were for men and women who had done their duty to the very end. She asked if that meant they completed the mission. I said yes. She didn't ask what the mission was. Sometimes I think that's the part I should have explained. By 1 in the afternoon, I was back at home, sitting at the kitchen table with the phone face up. I wasn't waiting for her to call. Rebecca isn't the type to call when she's cornered. She's the type to show up unannounced, forcing the conversation on her own terms. That was what Evans was worried about. At 1:17, the phone buzzed. Not a call, but a text from Laura. Laura, they're here. I'm in the bedroom with the door closed. I can hear them going through the garage. I replied, stay inside. Don't interfere. You're safe with them there. She didn't text back. I pictured her sitting on the edge of the bed, hands clasped, listening to boots on concrete and the sound of boxes being moved. I knew that sound. It's the sound of someone looking for the truth without caring if they wake the whole house. At 2:04, Evans called. We found it. I let the words settle. What did you find? 3 glass vials labelled with masking tape, WSR, root stalk, and tincture. 2 of them contain dried plant matter consistent with white snake root. The third contains liquid. We'll send it to the lab for confirmation. We also found handwritten notes on preparation methods, dosage estimates, and— He paused. And an unsealed envelope addressed to you. Inside, a small letter with your name at the top and the words, "You'll understand why when it's over," at the bottom. Nothing in between. Just a drawing of a tree with its roots circled. The kitchen felt colder. She left me a note in case the bottle worked. It would appear so, Evans said, his voice flat. We'll bag it, log it, and photograph everything. Laura is cooperating fully. She consented to the search of shared digital devices. Did you get her? I asked. Not yet. She wasn't home when we arrived. We're putting out an alert. I gripped the phone tighter. Detective, if she comes here, I've already flagged your address for priority response. Do not engage with her. The line was quiet for a beat. Then he added, We're moving from suspicion to evidence, Mrs. Davis. This changes everything. I understand. I hung up and went to the fireproof box. I added a note. 2:04 p.m. Evans called, found vials, notes, letter. I read the other index cards in the stack, one by one, as if consulting the manual for a machine that can't be taken apart. Each entry was a piece of proof that the last month had not been a fever dream. Around 3:30, I called Laura to update her. Robert was sleeping. She listened without interrupting, the same way she had when I called her from the emergency room years ago after my heart attack. Mary, she said when I was done, this is going to end one of 2 ways. Either they arrest her, or she runs. She won't get far, I said. No, but far enough to make you wonder. At 4:12, the door alarm went off. I was in the hall in 3 steps, phone in hand. The front door was shut, the thread in the frame undisturbed. The sound had come from the back. I moved slowly, not out of fear, but because you don't rush when you need to see everything. Through the kitchen window, I saw the screen door swing once, twice, then settle. No one in sight. I moved closer and saw a folded piece of paper tucked between the knob and the frame. I opened the door, disarmed the alarm, and took the paper. A single sentence in thick black marker. Stop letting them in, or I will. No signature, no envelope, just those words. I took a picture, put the paper in a plastic glove, and called Evans. He said an officer would be by in 15 minutes. Peterson arrived in 10, photographed the note in my hand, the spot on the door, the hinges, and the backyard beyond. See anyone? He asked. No movement on the street, I said. Could have been dropped, and she left fast. He left with the note, promising to log it immediately. That night, I didn't bother with the couch. I put a chair in the corner of the living room where I could see both doors, front and back. The house had a faint metallic smell from the new locks. I kept the lights on, not because I wanted to see out, but because I wanted anyone outside to see me. At 9:45, my phone lit up. Unknown number. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, I played the message. Mom, it's me. They're making a mistake. Those things they found aren't what they think. You know me better than that. A pause. Call me, please. The voice was calm, measured, almost gentle, the kind of tone you'd use to sell something to someone who doesn't want to buy. I didn't call back. I wrote it down, word for word. The morning brought a hard frost. The grass was white at the tips, and the air tasted like metal. Evans texted at 8:12. We got her. Taken into custody without incident. Will update. I stared at the words until they stopped being shapes and became facts. I drove to the station just before noon. The waiting room was small, with 2 plastic chairs against one wall and a vending machine humming in the corner. Evans came out to meet me. She's not talking, he said. Asked for a lawyer right away. That's fine. We have enough to hold her. Laura provided substantial digital evidence. Emails referencing route preparation and the perfect timing. Search history for toxicity levels in adults over 60. What happens now? We'll present the charges to the DA's office. Attempted murder, possession of a controlled toxic substance, evidence tampering. The process will be fast. I nodded. My hands stayed in my pockets so they wouldn't do anything inappropriate. Evans watched me for a moment. Are you holding up? I'm standing, I said. Is that enough? When I left the station, the sky had turned a flat, monotonous grey, the kind that makes you think snow is coming, even if the forecast says otherwise. I drove without a destination, past the old mill, past the closed-down hardware store, past the diner that still smelled like grease from 20 years ago. I ended up at the hospital. Robert was awake, watching a game show with the sound off. Laura was beside him, knitting something green. They got her, I said quietly. Robert nodded once. Good. Laura's needles kept moving. Now what? Now, I said. We wait for the system to do its job. That night, I sat on the back steps with a cup of tea, the steam rising in the cold air. The backyard was silent, except for the occasional snap of a branch in the wind. Somewhere down the block, a dog barked once. Then it was quiet. I thought about the note on the door, the vials in the garage, the letter with the roots of the tree. And I thought about the little girl with the bread at the memorial park, asking if the names meant they'd completed the mission. Maybe that was my mission. Not to finish it, but to make sure it didn't finish me. When I went inside, I checked the thread on the door. Still there. Still telling the truth. Poison is an ugly word. It doesn't just sit in your mouth, it changes the way you breathe. Evans didn't say it right away. He let Richard explain first. Maybe knowing that hearing it from a friend would be less brutal than hearing it from a detective. But there's no soft way to hear that something meant to kill you was already inside a man you respect, and that you were the one who handed it to him. The decision about what to do with Rebecca came like a door clicking shut. I called Evans. "Tell the DA I'll testify. Full charges." He didn't say, "good choice," or "you're doing the right thing." He just said, "understood." And that was enough. 3 days later, the hearing was set. Preliminary motions, evidence lists, witness prep. Rebecca's lawyer, Carter, filed objections to half of it, but the judge overruled most of them. When they brought Rebecca into the courtroom for the first time, she scanned the room and found me. Her eyes held no softness. If anything, they grew colder, as if she'd just turned back to her list. I held her gaze because maybe she had. They call it a courtroom, but to me it felt like a minefield. Every word, every look could blow up in your face. I walked in thinking the truth would stand on its own. Then I saw the way Rebecca's lawyer smiled at me, like she already knew where I would step and how hard I would fall. The day of the evidence hearing, the benches were half full, but the air felt heavier than a packed church in August. I sat behind Evans and the prosecutor, my hands clasped in my lap, pretending they weren't sweating. Rebecca was brought in wearing an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed. She didn't look at me at first. Then she glanced over, just long enough for the corners of her mouth to twitch. Not a smile, but something colder. I remembered why I was there. Robert's hospital bed, the lab report, that damned notebook. The judge called us to order. Evans took the stand. He was professional and direct, walking the court through how the bottle was received, tested, and confirmed to be poisoned. Carter objected twice, claiming chain of custody issues, but the judge overruled both. Then it was my turn. The bailiff swore me in. I sat with the microphone close enough to hear my own breathing. The prosecutor started with simple questions: my name, age, where I lived, and my relationship to the defendant. "Yes, Rebecca is my daughter," I said, and it sounded strange out loud, like it belonged to someone else's life. The prosecutor walked me through the day of the gift. I told it straight: the package, the handwriting, the decision to give it to Robert, how Robert ended up in the hospital, how Richard tested the bottle. I kept my tone even, just as Evans had advised. Stick to the facts, let the evidence do the talking. Then Carter stood up. "Mrs. Davis," she began, her voice smooth like polished wood. "You claim to recognize my client's handwriting on the note." "I don't claim, I know." "But you hadn't seen that handwriting in over 3 years, correct?" "Correct." "Is it possible, then, that you're mistaken?" "No." She leaned forward, one hand on the railing. "Are you telling this court that a woman's life should be ruined because you think a note looks like her daughter's handwriting?" I felt the first heat rise in my chest. "I don't think." "I know." Carter stepped back, almost casually. "Interesting, because we have here," she held up a paper, "a handwriting analysis from a certified expert stating the note could not have been written by Rebecca Miller." Murmurs went through the room. The judge banged his gavel. The prosecutor objected, questioning the report's validity. The judge admitted it for the record, but my stomach sank. Carter smiled slightly. "And tell me, Mrs. Davis, isn't it true that you and my client have had a strained relationship for years? That you sold her mother's farm without consulting her?" The prosecutor objected again. Irrelevant and inflammatory. Sustained, the judge said. But the damage was done. The jury had heard it. When I was done, I stepped down, my legs heavier than before. Evans met me at the table. "They're trying to paint you as bitter and resentful," he said quietly. "It's all they have. Don't let it get to you." But I could feel it getting to me already. Outside on the courthouse steps, Robert was waiting, leaning on his cane. "They're playing dirty," he said. "Doesn't matter if it's true. They just need enough to confuse the jury." I nodded. "They have a handwriting report now." Robert's mouth twisted. "Bought and paid for, probably. I've seen it in business disputes. You can buy an opinion like you buy a tie." The day of the jury deliberation, the sky was grey and low, as if it were considering all our choices. I sat in the gallery, my hands crossed in my lap, staring at the back of Rebecca's head. Carter had done her job, sowing doubt, suggesting I was a spiteful mother fabricating claims. But the prosecutor had been relentless with the evidence. The notebook with my initials next to lethal dosages. The vials found exactly where Laura said they'd be. The search histories on white snake root and cardiac arrest in the elderly. When the jury came back, I took a deep breath. The foreman stood, looking not at Rebecca, but at the judge. "On the charge of attempted murder in the first degree, we find the defendant." In that half-second before he finished, I realized I'd been holding my breath since the day that bottle showed up on my porch. "Guilty." That single word fell like the first drop of rain on a roof after months of drought. It didn't thunder, it didn't roar. It just settled, quiet, but undeniable. And I knew there was no going back. Not for Rebecca, not for me. The courtroom didn't erupt in gasps like you see on TV. It just breathed differently. And for the first time in 3 years, so did I. The judge thanked the jury, dismissed them, and began to read the sentence. 25 years in the state penitentiary, with no possibility of parole for the first 15. His voice was steady and methodical, but I felt the weight of every syllable pressing down. Rebecca didn't flinch. She just sat there, hands cuffed in front of her, eyes fixed on a point above the judge's head. If I didn't know better, I'd think she was bored. The bailiff moved to escort her out, but Rebecca turned her head at the last moment. Our eyes met, and in that instant, there was no courtroom, no jury, no uniformed officers, just the little girl I'd taught to play baseball, looking at the woman she had tried to kill. Her lips airily moved. "This isn't the last chapter." Then she was gone. I thought relief would come, but it didn't. What came was an empty ache. Justice had been served on paper, but nothing on paper could piece back together what had been shattered between us. Robert put a hand on my shoulder as we walked out. "You did what you had to do, Mary. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I nodded but didn't answer, because there was a part of me that still wondered if I had lost more than I'd won. Weeks later, I sat on the porch with a cup of coffee. The trees had lost their leaves, and the first touch of winter was in the air. The chair didn't creak anymore. I'd finally fixed it. I thought about the bottle, the poison, the trial, and the long road that brought me here. People think revenge ends when the gavel falls, when the guilty one is led away. But the truth is, revenge is just the surface. Underneath it are the years you can't get back, the conversations you'll never have, the family dinners that will become empty chairs and cold plates. Justice gave me safety. It didn't give me peace. But as the wind shifted and brought the smell of wood smoke from somewhere down the road, I realized something. Peace isn't given. it's built. One quiet afternoon at a time, one decision not to look back at a closed door. I raised my cup to the empty yard. To endings, I said aloud, and to what comes next. Now, if you liked this story, don't forget to subscribe and click on this next video that's appearing on your screen, because in it, the story has a betrayal and a twist like you've never seen before.